Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Future is Old, the podcast that's about everything and anything having to do with getting old, because we're all getting old.
We're all doing it.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
My name is Peter Kaldish, your host.
And I am Rach Angard.
Rach, I want to talk to you about something that I know is near and dear to your heart today.
Okay.
First of all, why would you pair this sweater with these jeans with this outfit?
Oh, thank you so much. I just was feeling a little springy today.
Okay, so why? Why do you care about this stuff?
God, that's such a good question. It's like being a creative. I think it's so. Did you ever watch What Not to Wear?
I have, yeah.
That was so formative to me as a kid. And it was just like that one of their main things was no matter where you go, what you wear expresses who you are.
All right. So when did you start caring about fashion?
Probably like 8 years old. I wanted to be a fashion designer.
Oh.
That was one of the first jobs I ever wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
A fashion designer / dog breeder / singer.
Okay. Were you designing clothes for dogs?
I should have been.
Well, look, I'm excited about this episode because I think we're going to have a guest who's going to really talk about whether that desire for fashion should stop after a certain age.
And a certain age, right? Isn't that
think?
something we hear? No way. I mean,
Okay.
I think about my mom. She's always loved. My mom worked in the fashion industry
Oh.
in magazines. She loves it still. Of course,
Okay.
she's in her 60s.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't be ageist in fashion?
I'm gonna say no. We should not be ageist in fashion.
Well, I will tell you that our next guest agrees with you.
Okay, great. I cannot wait to meet her.
Let's meet Jacynth Bassett.
Great. Let's do it.
Today's guest has worked to drive societal change around age representation, earning her recognition as one of 22 Londoners changing the world. After graduating from the University of Cambridge, she founded The Bias Cut, the first truly age-inclusive independent online women's wear boutique. This was the launch pad for Ageism is Never in Style, now one of the leading global consultancy and community platforms around generational inclusion. Please help us welcome a woman with a passion to create a cultural and business shift in fashion and beauty, Jacynth Bassett. Welcome to The Future is Old, Jacynth.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, first of all, where are we finding you, Jacynth?
I'm in London, and I had to check the time because our clocks went forward this weekend, and I think in the States yours went forward a few weeks ago.
Well, you were on
So
time,
I-
so
I-
thank
I
you.
had- I better get this right. We've been working on a project with Stockton University in in New Jersey. I'm thinking Philadelphia because I flew into Philadelphia. And when I've been dialing in, there have been a few instances where I've turned up early and I'm like, where is everybody? And they're like, we've got the time difference is like 1 more hour out. So I was like, gotta get it right today.
Well, the other thing you've gotten right today is your fashion. I am digging the pink. Thank you for making our conversation more vibrant.
Thank you. Well, representing the brands, pink is very conveniently our brand color and my favorite color. So it's a very serendipitous connection. Oh, whoops! I chose my favorite color, the one to be
Oopsies.
owned by my business.
Smart, wise.
Yeah. So, Jacynth, I want to get right into it. I am dying to understand where did the idea for Ageism is Never in Style come from?
So it all came from my mum in particular. So, as you said, I was studying law at Cambridge and I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, found it very interesting, but it wasn't for me. And I wanted to go down a more entrepreneurial route, but also do something that I felt could make a positive difference. Not that you can't make a positive difference as a lawyer, to be very clear. My parents are lawyers, so I'm not going to knock lawyers, but it just wasn't what I could see as leaving what I was able to leave a positive legacy about. And I started thinking about my mum. So my mum had me at the age of 40. So whilst that's a lot more common now to have kids in your 40s, back in the early 90s, it was a lot less common. So it was something I was quite acutely aware of from a young age, that I had older parents. So I think it started on a sort of subconscious level, that I was aware that my parents were being treated a bit differently because of their age, particularly my mum was something I was witnessing. And then as I got in my teens, my mum and I loved fashion and style. We'd go shopping. And the way she was treated was so weird to me. you had a woman who had disposable income. She was in her 50s and loved style. As she says, style didn't just suddenly disappear because she suddenly turned a certain age.
Yeah.
And yet the way that the fashion industry was treating her was completely disconnected. And it didn't make sense to me that we had aging demographics and we had shifting wealth, shifting populations, and aging societies, and yet there were more options for me as a teenager in my a teenager in my teens, compared to my mum in her 50s, and I had no money.
Yeah.
And yet there were more options for me than my mum. So it just was completely disconnected. So when I was at university, I sort of thought, okay, I wanted to go down a more entrepreneurial route, and I just started thinking about my mum. And that was really where the seed came from, which was this need to disrupt the way in which the fashion industry perceived aging, which frankly it didn't want to discuss. It was, it still is a very youth-centric industry, and to champion a more age-inclusive approach to fashion and society as a whole, and kind of have a ripple effect.
Jacynth, can you jump into some of the egregious examples, like with your mom, right? I'm just curious, anecdotally, like, what were you observing specifically?
Honestly, some of them is quite horrific, some of the stories. So one instance, we were at a private fashion show, and this designer, who's quite well known in the UK, said that she was designing for women of all shapes and sizes, and then shocker, all the models were young women and tall and slim.
Of course.
And, as one to be expected. And my mum went up to the designer at the end, because there was sort of like a little trunk show afterwards, and said, "What could I wear from your collection?"
Wow.
And I always say this, if you don't get my mum to buy something, you've really failed as in your job, because my mum is ready. And she just looked at her, and bear in mind, this designer specialized in dresses and color and print. And she looked at my mum and went, this black shrug. And the worst thing is, my mum bought it because she was so embarrassed. But that's just like one instance. There were so many others. Shop assistants saying, is this really age appropriate for you? Are you sure this is for you? And actually, while this particular anecdote is not about my mum, it translates. So I was also at an event, this would have been 2015, hosted by one of the biggest fashion magazines in the entire world. We can probably all work out which one it is. And it was for everyone. It was public. But the majority of attendees were younger. And I was in this queue, and I started chatting to a woman who said to me, "I've come here today, I'm in my late 50s, because I love fashion and style, and a member of staff has actually come up to me and said, 'What are you doing here? You don't belong here. This isn't for you.'"
Oh my God. That, even just like the basic of, well, we all have to get dressed, to really boil it down to its most basic.
I have no
And who
words.
do you think's paying for all of this stuff? The designer
that's exactly
fashion.
right.
So,
that's exactly right.
So yeah, I mean, it was just, I finished my degree, and speaking to my mum and then speaking to her peers, speaking to friends, I just realized it was all too common, all too wrong. And that was kind of where it all came from. But even to this day, we have a global community of over 310,000, and the number of messages we receive on a daily basis from our community of their personal experiences are frankly quite horrific and shocking at times. There was one model who messaged us just the other day, and she told us how she started modeling at the age of 53, and she's in the States, and she saw a casting call for a show that did say for 20s and 30s-year-olds, but she messaged the producer and said, "Would you consider opening it up to all ages?" The producer took a screenshot of her picture, put it on his stories, and said, "What do you think, guys? Should I let Grandma model in this show?"
Oh my God.
And that message was literally last week.
I mean, you can't script these kinds of things. You know what I mean? Like, it's so obscene and so insulting to completely marginalize.
Insulting, it's narrow-minded.
Absolutely. To marginalize a population, candidly, that has the money to buy your products at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing.
Wild.
This is what that's why there's such a disconnect, because I'm not saying not everybody has the privilege and fortune to be able to spend a lot of money on a lot of things, but we're talking across the spectrum in the fashion industry. Yeah. This isn't just about designers, high-end designers. This is across the board. I always say if you want to look at, people can dismiss fashion and dismiss it for being frivolous, for being superficial. But if we think of the fashion industry as you say, it's clothing. We wear clothing. We're talking about billions of dollars here, millions of jobs, and we're talking about the fact that actually it has huge sway and impact on socioeconomic norms, cultural attitudes. And then you're completely marginalizing and dismissing, frankly, an increased group of people who are also going to be the people who are more likely to spend the money because they have maybe more likely some more disposable income. It's so short-sighted. And it speaks volumes, I think, these stories.
Jacynth, I love this combination of advocate and fashion icon that you've turned into. Here's why. You don't know
If only
this.
I could be an icon. But...
Well, no, you're definitely an icon in this space because of all the work you're doing, particularly from the perspective of a younger person, which I want to get to in a little bit. But just fun fact, I don't think you know this, Jacynth, but you and I share a bit of a background here. I studied law as well. I actually practiced and then just was very much attracted to this space as well because it's very entrepreneurial, in part because we all just sort of accept the status quo when it comes to aging and ageism. And also, fun fact, I don't know how fun it is really, but I worked at a Gap on the high street in Guildford in Surrey, which is a town outside of London. So I was the token American pushing pushing an American sensibility about fashion onto the Brits that were coming in.
That is so funny.
And I managed to sell out a pair of jeans because of it.
Of course.
But I bring this up to say, as a man in this space, I definitely see we get treated differently when it comes to fashion and aging. There's almost like not an expectation for us to be fashionable as we age or that they should sell to us. I'm wondering, in your work, Jacynth, what's the gender difference, if you see any?
So I guess because also the Bias Cut was a women's wear boutique, we've come at this through quite originally a gendered lens, looking at women and how they do typically experience unique or different challenges with aging. I think a lot of conversation, even colloquially, focuses on the challenges that women go through. You look good for your age or aging gracefully and all these things. It's often quite gendered. The conversation, I'm not saying that men don't feel the pressure, for example, to dye their hair. Brian Cox, the actor, has talked about how he felt pressured to dye his hair
or
in
to
his
have
20s.
hair.
Or have hair. It is absolutely real. But even down to my husband's an example. He's in his mid-40s and he went grey in his early 20s. He's never had really the issues that a lot of women face.
Right.
Even the fact that a few years ago in Canada, an anchor woman was reportedly fired because she decided to embrace her grey hair. All these things. So there are gendered norms and attitudes. I always kind of use this is an example. So if we look at the archetype in folklore of the journey of the life course that a man versus a woman goes through. So a man's life course is youth, warrior, sage. But a woman's is maid, mother, crone.
Whoa.
Now, there's actually a lot for embracing the crone, and actually there's been designers recently who, from quite a feminist perspective, have embraced that word, like hag on a shirt, to try and be like, actually, let's reclaim it, which I kind of love. But again, a woman is basically reduced to her biological capabilities or perceived biological capabilities, and value is perceived as that through society, and that's where image and things like that all tie together. So I do think that there are a lot of additional layers. I think ageism, sexism, they layer on top of each other. They have a kind of compound interest effect that makes it harder for a lot of women to age. That is not to say men don't experience it. And we have had a lot of men say to us, what about us too? And we've been very much like, yeah, this is about everyone. And we've really worked hard to open the space up to ensure that men feel included. And then we have men or women or different genders coming to us around their issues with sexuality or with ethnicity. There's so many points of intersectionality that we need to explore, which we do a lot of work around now. but historically we did come at it more through that female lens. And I think that a lot of examples in quite a everyday environment, you can see much more through the female experience, that it's much harder to age as a woman.
Right.
And I would say, Peter, I think you're kind of an example of somebody who, I don't know if you would agree, but I think for quite a long time in this space, it has been quite female-led.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think there are some men now who are like yourself, you've obviously been inside, who are now going, no, we're part of this too. And I think we need to open it up to make sure we realize it's about everyone, but also understand different points of intersectionality within it.
No, thank you for saying that, because there is a quiet and almost shameful I don't know, recognition that as men age, we should just accept it's okay to just have dad bods, no hair, not care about what you're wearing, when in fact, society makes judgments on men as well, on how they age. And I think we need as men to not just come to terms with that and be okay with that. It's not a sign of weakness to challenge a societal norm.
Right.
But also really be advocates for our female friends, because they know it more for longer. They've been suffering from this kind of bias for longer.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot to learn.
It is interesting where, like, I think what you were talking about, Jacynth, with like the life stages, I think as a young woman and girl, you feel the crone coming, and you were kind of like warned against the crone. But I think like for young boys, are you ever really hearing about the sage stage? You're not even, nobody's ever being like, be wary or be excited about that. But women are like, hey, be careful. You better get Botox so you don't look like an old crone. It's just interesting, the messaging.
And also, if you actually think of it if we want to look at it through fashion, you've actually got I would argue that the fashion industry has embraced older male models more readily than older female models.
Yes.
Celebrities, I mentioned Brian Cox, you have people like Willem Dafoe, and yes, they are often celebrities, and we must realize that, a celebrity does not represent everybody's experience. But I will say that they have been more readily accepting like icons and even, I think about this space I've been in for over 10 years now. 10 years ago, there were definitely more of the grey fox, silver fox influencers, opportunities than there were for women. And women were being given opportunities that usually were around menopause or something that was seemingly age specific, when older male influencers, creators and models were just invited in regardless, and it was not relevant to necessarily age. But then there's the flip side, where you've got people like the biohackers, you've got in the longevity space, who are a lot of men who are, the billionaires who are also really scared of aging and trying to create a space where basically they live forever. So there's obviously a fear there. So I think it's just so complex and layers. But exactly what you said also around women, a lot of the work we look at as well we're very passionate about framing this as an intergenerational cause around the entire life stage. And there's a lot of studies, and we've actually got a big piece of research coming out with Kantar, it should be in June, which looks at age inclusion across the life course in the workplace.
Cool.
And there are a lot of concerns for younger people, much more than people realize. I think that we focus a lot, understandably, on aging and ageism through the lens of getting older, because we are all getting older every moment of every day. But a lot of people do first approach this space through the lens of, people in older populations and older people in society, and not realizing that ageism can affect every single one of us at any age.
Wow.
So I think we need to kind of look at that, because then you've got, 15-year-old girls who are using preventative aging and talking about having Botox and all these things.
Honestly,
there's a lot of concern.
Yeah. And Jacynth, that's your point there about younger populations tackling ageism or having to tackle ageism is something that actually inspired the theme of this episode, because we were struck that there were 13-year-olds who were doing anti-wrinkle creams. And I'm thinking, you're 13.
You're 13.
First of all, and what's bad about a wrinkle?
And there's people younger than that.
People,
I think that somebody said how I think someone in our community was saying how when they're now in their 50s, when they were about 28, they were told, are you going to start using anti-aging stuff? And I think about myself in my early 30s. The first time I was asked if I was going to get Botox was in my early 20s.
Oh my God.
So I think it's getting younger and
It
younger.
is.
Yeah.
And this is preventative aging. I do think that the beauty industry is kind of in a dichotomy at the moment because they are recognizing that there is a shift, that their traditional consumer of anti-aging products, I don't love the term midlife, but we know what we mean, sort of the midlife and older consumer is actually going, hang on a second, I don't want this.
Yeah.
I don't buy, I know a lot of this is not really working, and actually I just want to look good for who I am, not for my age, but just for who I am today. So they're kind of trying to embrace that, but at the same time they do also have a lot of products to sell. They also have a proven systemic marketing system that's based around fear. I mean, the
Yeah.
term anti-aging was actually coined in the 80s by marketing execs
Oh my
just to sell
God.
something.
Yeah.
So they are trying to find ways to navigate this. And I think that's where you see a lot of brands. The thing that I find almost amusing, but then that's where obviously we go in to try and help them, is they'll do a campaign that's meant to be really age positive, and then it will say #look-younger.
Oh God.
And it's
Yeah.
complete contradiction.
That's right. That's right. Way
And
to
it's so
way to
common.
completely sell
And I
yourself
think
short.
it's because
Yeah.
they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I want to talk about that, about campaigns, because I think one of the things that we've seen a bit of a trend of is this notion of representation. You know, some do it better than others. Some corporates do it better than others in terms of representation. I know you've done some work around this, and I'm hoping, could you share a little bit about what you're working on to make sure that we're all represented in these types of campaigns?
So I think a real turning point for us was in 2023. We partnered with the charity in the UK, Centre for Aging Better,
Mm.
to create the first series of kind of more elevated fashion editorial style imagery of women in their 50s and 60s to improve representation. These are free images and they are available globally. People have probably seen them without realizing they've seen them. I think for me, one instance which was really amusing was my husband works for Dr. Martens,
Yeah.
The boots, yeah, or
shoe
the
brand.
shoes, yeah.
And yeah, the iconic shoe brand. And bear in mind, he's got nothing to do with branding or comms or anything. He texted me from work one day a couple of months ago and went, Jacynth, your images are in our annual report because they have found our images. So he'd had no input in this.
Wow.
How
that's
amazing.
So funny.
It was kind of amazing. So these images were really created almost to be a blueprint because we can't represent everybody with 6 women.
Yeah.
And it was very a conscious decision that we went 50s and 60s because we didn't want to be just a tick boxing exercise. Here's the 40-year-old, here's the 50-year-old, here's the 60-year-old, 70-year-old. And it was very data led. So we did a survey. And one of the things that came out in the survey actually was how gray hair has become a bit of a stereotype shortcut for brands to try and pretend they represent older people. That's not to say don't have gray hair, to be very clear. Love gray hair. Gray hair's amazing, but not everyone has gray hair. They might have pink hair.
Right.
They might do different things. And so it was really important for us to show that. And so that's why I think the images were so successful. And they had millions of views and downloads. They're on Unsplash. But it was a blueprint. Not only do we want to do more of the images, what it then kind of led to as well is us launching campaigns. So we launched a campaign called I Look My Age, which had over 45 million views around the
45
world.
million.
It was kind of
Wow.
amazing. It was kind of a note to self, never go on holiday just before you're launching a social media campaign, because I did not have a holiday. But it was good. It was good fun. And that was really about improving representation where everybody, men, women, all ages, could take part and go, I look my age. I don't look good for my age. I don't look bad for my age. This is my version of my age. What's your version of your age?
Cool.
It was about celebrating that individuality, that diversity of aging. And then what we've done since as well is we created a content creator network and a modeling network. So we get brands coming to us all the time sort of saying, we realize we need to have better representation. We need to be more authentic. We need to actually be tapping into and speaking to the audiences that we're trying to now market to. I mean, it's a bit of a long term coming, right?
Yeah.
But finally they're saying that. So we've got these networks that are completely free for our community to join. We've got about 800 members across the
Wow.
two. And then we connect the dots. We're not an agency, we're just sort of like a facilitator that then opens doors up for our community members to then work with brands. And again, it's amazing because some of them have gone on to have big careers, be featured in magazines and
Wow.
editorials. Some have signed with modeling agencies. So not only are we improving representation, but we're improving opportunities,
Wow.
which I think is something that's really important. If we're going to talk about equitable futures with aging, it's not just about the output, it has to be internally in the system that people have opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, Jess, I'm going to ask what might be a silly question, but I just want to reinforce, I think, what the answer is going to be, which is, why is that important? Why isn't an idealized version of beauty just a good thing to have?
I mean, I think we've had such restrictive beauty norms, right, for so long that it creates a sense of exclusivity. And if you don't feel seen, if you don't see represented, not only does it affect opportunities that others create for people, but also affects the opportunities or rather limits the opportunities you give yourself. It can completely sway your internalized attitudes and limitations about what you can do and what you can't do and achieve. One of our sort of themes this year is age liberation. And that's not just about liberating ourselves from the systems, but actually liberating ourselves from the internalized bias, the internalized limitations and restrictions that we've imposed upon ourselves. So that's why I think representation is so important. But one of the phrases I often use when I speak to beauty and fashion is, they'll argue, oh, but it's meant to be aspirational. And yeah, absolutely, fashion and beauty is aspirational, but it's not delusional, right? It's like saying, a 20-year-old model representing a cream that's supposedly for skincare needs or requirements as you get older, if you want those. I'm not saying you need them, but if you did want them, somebody's not going to wake up in their 50s and say, I'm going to put this cream on and suddenly look 20 tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So
No, delusional
it's about
is fine. Yeah, no, you're right.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's so important to do that. But I think we've seen so much around the importance of representation. And again, interestingly, some of the insights were coming out from this report that we're doing with Kantar. It's not just about representation for your consumers, but it's also representation for your internal teams, your people strategy, your talent strategy. If they are not feeling represented by your business, what is that saying? If your outputs, if your comms are not saying that you value everybody and you're not representing everybody, that's not going to foster an environment where we can seize the opportunity of longevity and longer lives. So as we're sort of really saying at the moment, ageism and age bias is posing a huge threat to that. It's a huge threat to longevity, opportunity, and to the multi-generational workforce. We can talk all we want about the promises and the opportunities, which there are many, but if we do not address the age bias elephant in the room, and that goes through visuals, representation, systems, everything, it's not going to last, and it's not going to actually have a sustainable impact.
Wow.
I this time has gone by so quickly.
I know. I'm like, I want another hour.
I know. We'll have to
talking
have
about
you
this.
back. We'll have to have you back.
I have a tendency to talk a bit too much, so I do apologize.
No, don't apologize at all. But I want to end on one question before I hand you over to Rach, Jacynth, and that is, given where you sit in London, I'm wondering if you see any obvious cultural differences between perhaps how Americans treat ageism versus perhaps the UK or across Europe or across Asia. What are some observations you have?
So obviously these are going to be more generalizations right now.
Yeah.
But what I would say is the US, the UK, and probably places like Australia culturally are a little bit further ahead. I think we're seeing some shifts in certain like super ager countries like Japan, South Korea, but a lot of people can easily say those countries aren't ageist. There is still ageism there.
Yeah.
It often is around how you pose and look at aging. So if you look at them from a more of a familial context, they might say we respect our elders, for example. But actually, if you look at the structures and the systems, older people in society and populations are still being sidelined. And I was having a chat with Help Age India on Friday, the charity in India, and they are dealing with a lot of issues with ageism in society there. But from the US and the UK specifically, so from a cultural standpoint, I actually would suggest that the US is slightly ahead of the UK.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting.
In the terms of the conversation.
Hmm.
So I having been in this for over 10 years now, I would say, and please correct me if you feel otherwise, but the tide was starting to turn around like 2019 to 2020 in terms of people talking about aging in the US.
Mhm.
Would you say?
I think
don't know.
that's fair.
Would you say around them?
I think that's fair. Yeah. And then it jump started because of COVID, I
Right.
think.
Right. Whereas in the UK, it's only been since about 22, 23.
Oh.
And, even from a media standpoint, for example, the media's been a lot more reserved. I know of brands who've been told, you couldn't talk about aging. Now you can talk about menopause. So now you can talk about aging. It's only just now that that's
Oh,
happened.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I do think the menopause movement in the UK, however, has been quite instrumental in that. On the flip side, I'd say policy-wise, the UK is further ahead than the US.
Not
Mhm.
surprised.
So
No.
things like, for example, under the Equality Act in the UK from 2010, age is a protected characteristic as a whole. So all ages are protected. Whereas in the US, as I understand it, over 40s are a protected class. But there isn't necessarily as much protection for under 40s. Is that correct?
That's
So,
generally correct. Yeah, and I don't want to get all lawyerly on you because I'm not an expert on this. But the gist is there are definitely different burdens of proof you have to prove for age discrimination depending on how old you are. Absolutely.
Oh.
From a cultural standpoint, the conversation, I mean, just down to the fact that I would say the US has been a bit more, and I realize obviously things have changed, or perhaps we've had some regression recently, but things around going grey, but also having freedom of choice around whether to get work done, not all those things like that. In the UK for a while, it was like, you've now got to go grey. You can't have any work done. You can't do anything. Otherwise, you're in complete denial of aging. So it was kind of a bit sort of one extreme to another, like a pendulum swing. So
yeah, we're
I think,
hypocritical
there's
too.
sort of
Right, Jess?
that's what I would say.
We're hypocritical, right?
It's just going from extreme.
2 years ago, we were complaining. We were told to complain about the fact that we had a 79-year-old president.
Right.
And fast forward to
Right, and then
2026,
suddenly,
we literally have the oldest
we
president.
suddenly can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're hypocritical about it.
exactly.
Anyway, Jacynth,
Yeah,
I
so
have
I
to.
think
Yeah,
it
go
is.
ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think there's a reason for that our following has been bigger in the US rather than the UK. And it's now building in the UK, but we've had a bigger traction in the US in the last 5-10 years.
Love that.
But it's not as clear cut. I think that's the problem, is we can't just say one is better. It's not binary, is it?
Right.
It's completely complicated. And as you say, one minute we can use leverage age against somebody as a political advantage or disadvantage, and then suddenly you can't. So,
Yeah.
It's always shifting.
Well, Jacynth, listen, I'm going to now turn you over to Rach, who has some final questions for you.
Yes, Jacynth, thank you so much. Like we alluded to, I could talk about this for hours and hours. So I'll just kind of book a flight to London next week and we can just spend a few days talking.
Well, I'll come over to you guys. I mean,
perfect.
Let's do it either way.
Perfect. What do you not miss about being younger?
I definitely don't miss having less confidence and less resilience.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know. So I think you and I are about the same age, and I'm like, wow, even just the shift from 27 to 31 has been huge.
Exactly. I think it is quite, and again, it sounds ridiculous, but you have that sort of, oh my God, I'm turning 30. Yeah, no. I think you gain further perspective with age, that when you're younger, you can get a little bit too bogged down in everything, and you realize, no, the bigger picture is it's not as complicated, and it's not as terrifying.
Yeah, it's not as terrifying. Okay, what is the gold in getting old?
I think it is perspective, like time, opportunity. I always say there's light and shade at every stage of life. And the reality is aging is not easy. There are complications, there are challenges, but it's often around life stage rather than age. But I always think about, I lost one of my very close friends when she was 17. Well, we were both 17. And she didn't get the privilege to live longer. So I always think that the gold in getting old is the privilege of the fact that you've actually had time and you can do things.
Yeah, the privilege of time. Love that. Okay, last one for you. Finish this sentence for us. I will know the future is old when
old is no longer perceived as a negative. And the term itself isn't a negative. It's not used as a pejorative. It's not used as an insult. The reality is, I think, surely the goal should be to get old, right? So it actually shouldn't be something we should be afraid of. So for me, the future is old when it's just normal and actually something not necessarily to aspire towards, but actually, as I say, to live is something that we should all be hoping to do and not feel fearful of getting older.
It's funny you should say that because that's our tagline on this podcast, that the future is old. It's a podcast about everything that everyone's doing is becoming old.
Becoming old, yeah.
So I'm so glad you ended
We
on
are,
that note.
all of us are getting old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jacynth,
And
thank you
hopefully
so
we'll be
much
old
for joining us today. If people wanted to follow your work, where can they find you?
So ageism is neverinstyle.com is our main website. And then I would say for our kind of cultural and societal work, head over to our Instagram where we post regularly a lot of visuals, content campaigns. And also we've got a campaign coming up in the summer to celebrate our 10 years. So that's how you can take part there. And then I'd say for our more kind of business, thought leadership, but also turning awareness into action, LinkedIn. And then, as I say, our website, ageism is neverinstyle.com.
Great. Well, Jacynth Bassett, thank you so much for joining us. And we have to have a part 2, right?
I know, please.
I would love that. And even better if we're in person together.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you,
Jacynth.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.